Let me read you something that Speaker Gingrich wrote in his book, To Renew America. He said, since 1965, there has been a calculated effort by cultural elites to discredit this civilization and replace it with a culture of irresponsibility that is incompatible with American freedoms as we have known them. Mm-hmm. Do you buy that? Is that basically what you're saying?
Yes, although I would limit that to those who are sort of at the top of this kind of thing. Because further down the people believe things because so many others believe them, because they're in the air and so on.
But you know, I was particularly interested in what he said was that it is a calculated effort. This now, do you believe that the people, the anointed, as you call them, are sitting around in a conspiratorial mode, calculating, as Newt Gingrich says, and saying, here's what we're going to do? Or do you just think they're wrong and this is what they believe and they have this certain arrogance about it? Because it's two very different ideas.
This is why I made the distinction between the leaders and the others. I mean, I think that when people say things like, more American wives are battered on Super Bowl Sunday, you see, than any other time of the year, and there's not a speck of evidence for that. That is calculated, because there is no data that could even be misinterpreted that way. In other words, because there is no data, period. And so, yes, but I think that 99% of the people who believe it are not calculating. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the reasons that it flies without even being challenged for evidence is that there is a certain vision of how the world is, and in that world, men are oppressing women. And therefore, when you say something like this, it fits the vision, and that's the end of it. There's no demand for evidence.
You have in your book sort of a series toward the beginning of how the actual process works of forming one of these ideas and selling it and rejecting the proof. Maybe you could just kind of march it through this as a model of it.
All right, there's a four-stage pattern. And in the first stage is what I call the crisis. And so we're hyped to believe that something is a terrible crisis for which something must be done. What was fascinating to me in doing the research for the book is that very often the thing that's said to be in crisis has often been getting better for years on end. But that gets ignored. Then the second stage is,
for example, infant mortality, to use one of the
I'm thinking about teenage pregnancy and venereal disease. Those things were getting better. Teenage pregnancy was going down for more than a decade before sex education was introduced. Venereal disease, syphilis in 1960s had only half the incidence that it had in 1950. So all these things are going down, yet we're said to need sex education to deal with this crisis, which is then manufactured. And again, this is where the calculated part comes in. Now, 99% of the people who hear this don't know that. But the reason they accept it is because they also share the same vision. And because this is consonant with that vision, they don't have to ask for evidence.
All right, so what's stage two?
Stage two is
the first one is there's a crisis.
Yes.
They establish a crisis, usually an artificial one.
Yes.
Okay.
Then stage two is the solution. You have a solution for this crisis. In this case, you have sex education in the schools. And then at that point, you say, if we do this, this will lead to beneficial result A. The critics say, no, it'll lead to detrimental result Z. Stage three, you put it in the results, you put it in, and directly you find detrimental result Z, namely venereal disease and teenage pregnancy take off into the stratosphere. And then stage four is the fascinating part, in which they simply say, no, that doesn't prove that this was a bad policy, because there are many factors. There's complexity. It's simplistic to blame it on this. But they run through this routine on so many different things, including crime. Similarly, they said, in 1960, Judge Bazelon said we just desperately need to have some kind of change in the criminal justice system. Now, in 1960, there were fewer murders than there had been in 1950, 1940, or 1930. But again, that was completely ignored. And so now we have the revolution in the criminal justice system. People say, no, if you have put these new things in, there'll be more crime than before. They put them in. Almost instantly, the declining crime rate turns around and heads up again. And they say, no, it's simplistic to blame this on this. There are the root causes and the neglect of society and all the rest of it. So it's heads I win, tails you lose.